Everyone, great to see you all today, and it's great to be here as well. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the basics that you will need to know if you're an international student or international worker here. We're going to talk about how to make sure that you can get your work permits extended or maintain your status. And then we're going to move on to talking about permanent residence. So let me just share my slides here. All right. Okay, so let's first talk about temporary residence. The first thing I want to talk with you guys about is extending your status. You will all have, if you're a workers international student, you will all have a document with you, a study permit, work permit, where there's an end date to it. Okay, and one of the very important things that you need to know is about maintaining your status and extending your status if you want to stay in Canada beyond that end date. So let's say I have a work permit that is going to expire in, let's say, July 31st, okay? If I file my extension application in Canada to extend the work permit before it expires, then I can continue my status to work in Canada until a decision is made. That is called maintained status or implied status, okay? Now, a few things that you need to understand. The website, IRCC website, has a recommendation that you file 30 days before. That is only a recommendation. That is not the law. The law is as long as you file it before it expires. You can even file it on the day of, although I wouldn't recommend it because of the glitchiness of the system. You know, you should try to do it maybe a few days before so you don't get locked out if there's any sort of technical issues. But as long as you file it before it expires, you have the legal right to continue on in Canada. If you file the work permit extension and you have a work permit, your current work permit status continues on until a decision is made. If you are a student, and we're going to talk about that, and you file for your postgrad work permit within the allotted time, then you can also work while you're waiting for the decision to be made. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, I don't really qualify yet. You know, that's why I didn't apply. But oftentimes, you may qualify for it while waiting for the decision to be made. So for example, I would have perhaps had a work permit and my employer doesn't have his LMIA yet. I would still file my work permit extension while I'm waiting for the LMIA to be issued. If I do that, it currently takes around 3 to 4 months for a work permit to be issued. And in that case, if my employer's LMIA is issued before my work permit is decided, then I can say, hey, officer, and I will add my LMIA to my application, update my application, and I will get a work permit at the end. If I don't file the work permit before it expires, then I have to stop working immediately when my work permit expires, okay? Now, you do have a second chance if you don't file the extension before your current status expires. You have what's called restoration. And the normal restoration period is 90 days from the last day of your status. So if I didn't apply to extend my work permit on July 31st, okay, I completely forget, and August 1st I say, oh no, I didn't file my extension yet, I have 90 days from the date that my work permit expired to file restoration. Now, you have to pay a fee, and you file the restoration. You can do that. You can stay in Canada until the decision is made. But if you didn't file before and you're on restoration, you cannot work until a decision is made. Okay, same thing with the study permit. If you didn't file your study permit extension before your status ends and you're filing restoration, you cannot study until a decision is made. So the first thing you want to do is, when you go back, take a look at your status and make sure that is circled on your calendar many, many times, and make sure that you know what you're going to do before it expires. The second thing I want to talk to you guys about is the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled work. Now, in immigration, when we go and talk about permanent residence, there is a great emphasis on the occupation that you've worked in. Right now, the system is divided into 5 categories under the National Occupation Classification Codes, the NOC codes. And it's O, A, and B are the high-skilled, and C and D are the low-skilled, okay? Oftentimes, when you're doing a job, you may not think that it's high-skilled or low-skilled. For example, if I was to go and work in an office, okay? If I was to work as a secretary, that's high-skilled. But if I was to work as a receptionist, that's low-skilled. If I was to work as a bookkeeper, that's high-skilled. But as an accounting clerk, that's low-skilled. Okay, so there's a sometimes you don't even realize, or you wouldn't even think that something is high-skilled or low-skilled. But what's very important is you have to check the occupation code that is set out by the government to see whether or not it's high-skilled or low-skilled. Because when we go and apply for permanent residence, this makes a huge difference, okay? Now, there's going to be a new system with regard to these NOC codes that the government has said will likely be implemented sometime later this year. It's going to be 6 tiers instead of 5, and 4 of those tiers will be high-skilled. There are 3 occupations that were previously classified as high-skilled that will no longer be high-skilled. But there are 16 new occupations that were previously classified as low-skilled that will be high-skilled. Immigration law changes so much, and oftentimes what happens here, what I'm telling you today, is going to change tomorrow. So, I'm going to have my information at the end. We do have newsletters there, and if you want to sign up to one of our newsletters, we can let you know when things like this, when they change, and we send out information on our newsletters. Okay, so let's talk about international students. If you're an international student, very important to know that even if your study permit is valid for several years, if you do not actively pursue studies, and by actively pursuing studies means you're going to classes, you're doing your exams, etc. If you're not registered as a student, then you will lose your status within 90 days, unless there is authorized leave. So authorized leave is when you first go to the school and ask them, can you give me authorized leave for certain reasons? For example, medical leave, or something's going on with your grades and you just want to take a semester off. Okay, it will be up to the school whether or not they will give you authorized leave, and you can have authorized leave of up to 150 days. And if you do that, then you're still considered to maintain your student status. Okay. When you're working, now you can only work based on your study permit if you are a full-time student, except in the last semester. Okay. But when you've completed, that means when you've completed your studies, when you get the first notification from the school that you've completed your program, IRCC deems you no longer to be a student and you have to stop working right there and then. Okay. So the only exception is if you're in between two programs and the second program, you've already been accepted to the second program, which will start within 150 days of the first program. Post-grad work permits are very important. I mean, you would have studied for all this time, and probably one of the main reasons you want to study in Canada is to get that post-grad work permit. Okay. Very important to understand that you can only have one post-grad work permit in your life. You can't get two. And the post-grad work permit is something that I think of as a golden ticket. It is very, very nice, okay? Because it is an open work permit. You can work for anyone you like. I'm going to talk in the next slide about some of the other ways to get work permits. And you can see that to extend your postgrad work permit, it may not be that easy. It may even be impossible for you. For most students, it is. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a plan before you even apply for postgrad work permit as to what you're going to do in order to get permanent residence. Because a lot of times, for example, if you do a 1-year program, you'll only get a 1-year work permit. That may not be enough, depending on your circumstances, for you to actually get the work experience you need to get permanent residence at the end. Okay. Some other things about the postgrad work permit. One of the reasons we see a lot of postgrad work permits being rejected is when you look at your transcript, it doesn't show that you have maintained full-time status. You're a full-time student throughout the entire program, except in the last semester. They give an exception for the last semester. Okay. And so if the officer finds that you're a part-time student in one program, in one semester, they would likely reject your postgrad work permit. So going back, a lot of students sometimes say to me, well, I'm just not doing so well this semester. Maybe I'm sick, or I have to, help someone, or etc. And I can't do it full-time. I'm just going to go part-time. My answer to that is actually just take off the entire semester. Ask your school to give you authorized leave. Because if you only go part-time in one semester, that could mean that you will not qualify for postgrad work permit at all when you graduate. And you would have to do another program in order to get the postgrad work permit. Okay. Now, let's talk about when you can apply for your postgrad work permit, when you should apply for your postgrad work permit. The IRCC website says that you can apply for your postgrad work permit within 180 days of you finishing your program. But if you just go and apply, let's say 170 days, and you just go and apply for postgrad work permit, likely it's going to be rejected. The reason is because you need to have a valid study permit or student status in order to qualify for a postgrad work permit. And remember what I said in the first bullet. You lose your status within 90 days once you finish studying. So in order to, apply in 170 days, we would have to file a restoration of status for your student status and then apply for the work permit. But you wouldn't be able to study. So you wouldn't be able to work while waiting for your work permit if you applied at that time. So here's my rule for you, for 90% of you guys, okay? You should apply for your postgrad work permit within 90 days of the completion of your program. When you first receive that indication from the school that you've completed your program, count 90 days. That's your deadline. Or if your study permit expires before the 90 days, then your study permit is your deadline. Okay, so whichever comes first, your study permit, validity date, or the 90 days of from the completion of your program. That's your deadline. All right, let's talk about some other work permits that people can get. There is the default for people to get a work permit is the LMIA. So let's say your postgrad work permit expires. You want to go and extend your work permit. Likely what's going to happen is you would need to have a labor market impact assessment, LMIA, in order to get a work permit. The LMIAs are not easy to get. And for many employers, they don't like getting them. In fact, I've never met an employer who liked the LMIA. They sometimes do it because they have to, but the LMIAs are the normal streams, the high and low wage streams, are where the employer has to advertise and try to recruit Canadians for 1 month. And then they apply for the LMIA and try to convince an officer that it's not possible for them to find a Canadian who has the skills that are needed for this position. Okay. So, you know, for a lot of international students, if all of your work experiences in Canada, your education, there's, you know, thousands of other Canadians who have the same education as you, that might not be something that employer can get, even if they're willing to do. It just depends on the occupations a lot of times, okay? There's a second route, which is called the Global Talent Stream. And for the most part, the people who can apply through that are people who are in the tech fields. And the employers, they don't have to go through the recruitment of Canadians. They do have to offer a labor market benefit plan. And they may or may not be willing to do that, but it's a little bit easier to get tech workers if you belong to one of those streams through the LMIA. There's another stream for the Global Talent Stream called Category A, which is for innovative companies to hire very high-level executives. It's a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about, but it is there. Free trade agreements are wonderful labor agreements that Canada has with certain countries. For example, US, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, South Korea, the EU, UK, and this, and there's others, Panama, for example, Chile. Did I say? Yeah. Anyway, so these kind of Australia, Japan, these kind of free trade agreements allow professionals and a lot of technicians from these kind of countries to come here and obtain work permits that bypass the LMIA. Okay, and so there are different sort of requirements for each, but all of them still require a job offer from an employer for that particular occupation. Entrepreneur work permit is something where if someone wants to set up a business in Canada, that there's a possibility for us to apply for a work permit for them to set up a business in Canada. Francophone, it's for people who are fluent in French and who have a high-skilled job offer outside of Quebec. This is a very nice program for people who are fluent in French. We can certainly get a work permit quite easily if they have a job offer. International experience class are for young people from certain countries, like the working holiday work permit, which is an open work permit, or the young professionals work permit, which if you have a job offer in Canada, then we can apply for the work permit in that way. Hong Kong work permit, for those of you who are Hong Kong residents and who have recently graduated from an eligible program, you can get an open work permit that way. Spousal work permits. So if some of you are international students, or if you're a worker in a high skilled position, then you can get a spousal work permit for your spouse. So who is a spouse? Someone you're married to, or someone who you're common law with, which is someone who you have lived together with for at least 1 year. Okay. And then the bridging work permits. So bridging work permits are for people who hold work permits and they're going to expire soon, but they have been accepted for certain permanent residence applications. For example, if you had applied for express entry, you've received your invitation to apply and you've submitted your application, you can apply for bridging work permit. Or if you've applied for a provincial nominee program and you've received an approval for that, you can get a bridging work permit as well. We'll talk more about that when we talk about permanent residence. Okay, so that's it right now that I had for temporary residence. Do we have any questions at this time? Nope. Okay. All right. We have someone. Okay, so someone has, did you, Jackie, did you want to ask the question? Did you want to?
Kim says, there are recent news about the faster pathway for temporary workers. How do you think about it? Will it like the special pathway for the pandemic as last year? That's the first question.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So, I mean, I think that's a very good question. Last year, there was a special program called the TR2PR TR2PR pathway for permanent residence. And it allowed a lot of international students and workers, many who were not high skilled, a lot of low skilled workers, to apply for permanent residence. I think it was an experiment by the by IRCC, and it was good in certain ways. A lot of applicants got their permanent residence, but it's in another way, it ended up in a huge backlog in immigration for other people, such as people, for example, the express entry. Basically, there were so many people that was in the system that they stopped inviting people under express entry for, since October of last year. And they probably won't open it until July of this year. I think so. The government does have a mandate to create another program to help international students and workers to get permanent residence. We don't know what those details are. Once we do, we normally have a webinar and we send out information on our newsletters. So feel free to sign up on our website. But what I would say is, I don't think it's going to be exactly the same as last year. I think they're learning a lot about it, and I think they're going to be more restrictive than last year, because last year was just, there were too many people who qualified and glutted the system. Normally, the government values people who have worked in Canada or who have job offers in Canada. They may or may not do a high skilled, low skilled distinction. That remains to be seen. But no matter what, I think it's important, if you kind of wanted to hedge your bets, to at least be working in Canada and gain that work experience in Canada. Better to be high skilled than low skilled, but again, I don't know what their occupations would be.
There is a second part of the question. Kim says that they're holding the OWP and now working in Canada for 6 months only. What can she do? Is it waiting for working for 1 year and apply for the Canadian experience pathway?
So that's something that is very difficult for me to answer on the spot because I don't know what the rest of the background is. When we talk about permanence, you'll see that it really depends on your situation. We would look at ways to extend your work permit well, so that you can get your permanent residence if that's needed. We'll need to look at what your other aspects of your background is in order to qualify for permanent residence. Okay, but excellent questions. All right, so let's move on to permanent residence. The first category I wanted to talk with you guys about is express entry. It is the most well-known and I think the more used way for permanent residence. And so essentially how it works is, first, you have to create an online profile. And you create an online profile if you qualify under 3 categories: federal skilled worker class, Canadian experience class, or federal skilled trades class. Once you create an online profile, you can go into the express entry pool. In the pool, well, you can stay in the pool for 1 year. And when you do, you'll get a series of points based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nomination. But just because you've created an online profile and are in the express entry pool, it does not mean that you have applied for permanent residence. This is really important because a lot of people, they tell me, oh, I've applied for express entry, and they're only in the pool. They have not at that point applied. Okay, you're just a candidate for applying. You can be in the pool for a year, and if your profile expires, it will mean nothing, right? The main thing is, if you're in the pool, you want to get the invitation to apply, the ITA. If and only if you get the ITA, can you then submit your application and apply for permanent residence. So we're going to talk about this, but before I talk about it, let me first talk about how you can get into the pool. So there are 3 programs to get into the pool. The first one is the federal skilled worker class, and this is for people who have never, you can apply even if you've never been to Canada. Okay, the work experience required for this is 1 year of high skilled continuous work experience that is a full-time, which is at least 30 hours a week in one occupation. Okay, so this could be work experience that you get overseas. This could be work experience you get while you're studying. This could be work experience that you get while you're self-employed. This work experience is very, very different from the Canadian experience class work experience. They'll do also an assessment based on your background, and you need to meet your minimum score, and you need to also have enough financial savings to qualify. Prior to COVID, federal skilled workers were in the same sort of situation as everybody else in the pool. And if your score was high enough, then in the next draw, you would likely get an invitation to apply. When COVID began, though, the government placed a great emphasis on people who have work experience in Canada and qualified under the Canadian experience class. And federal skilled workers, during COVID, I mean, there was few draws in 2020, but other than that, 2021, there were no draws at all for federal skilled worker class. Okay, so will they continue to draw for federal skilled workers? Probably, but I was just testifying before Parliament a few weeks ago, and it seems like the government wants to put in what they call groupings for selection on top of the current selection criteria. And I have a feeling that this might be something to do with occupations lists, especially for people in federal skilled workers. So there might be more and more restrictions on federal skilled workers. The Canadian experience class is for people who have work experience in Canada. And the work experience is very, very specific. in this, okay? You have to have at least 1 year of work experience in a high-skilled job or jobs. It could be different occupations, okay? It doesn't have to be continuous, okay? But you have to have 1 year of work experience, and you can't be a full-time student when you're gaining this experience. It has to be high-skilled, and you cannot be self-employed. You have to be getting your T4s, and your your payroll should have EI, CPP deducted, etc. Okay, you have to be employed in Canada as well. So the work experience in this very, very important. It gets you to qualify for Canadian Experience Class. Last year in 2021, the government had a lot of draws for people in the Canadian Experience Class. At one point, they invited everybody in the pool for the Canadian Experience Class. I think the lowest score was 40 or something like that. And then later on, the scores dropped to unprecedented levels of 300, I think 340 something for a while. And then the government, I guess they miscalculated, and they said, oh, shoot, we've invited way too many people. We filled up all our inventory for 2022 in November of 2021. So they stopped inviting everybody in the pool, except for people who have provincial nomination. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Ontario provincial nominations. But the government has made an announcement that they will start the draws in July. However, Express Entry is such that it's a competition. The government skims the cream from the top. So if each time they want to invite, let's say 3,000 or 4,000 people, they're going to take the people who have the top scores for the 4,000. So the scores, because there literally hasn't been any draws other than provincial nominee programs since October, I believe. The inventory has been building, and so it is anticipated that at least in the first while, the scores will be very high, likely above 500 for the draws. Okay, skilled trades, I'm not going to go into. Very few people go under the skilled trades program. This is more for the construction trades, etc. Okay, so let's talk about how to get your score for Express Entry. What counts? Age, okay? Once you turn 30, it's no longer a happy birthday, okay? Your age drops 5 or 6 points in your 30s. 40 is a fast slide, -10, -11. By the time you're 45, the good news is that your age points don't drop anymore. The bad news is it's a big fat 0. Okay, so there's a big difference when you're a little bit older compared to someone in their 20s who gets 110 points. Okay, for people who are older, that's something that is of issue. So not a lot you can do about age, except apply when you actually as early as you can. Education, normally if you don't have work experience in Canada and you want to get to the 470s and above, which is pre-COVID levels, you should have at least 2 degrees, one of which is a 3-year program, and the other one, is another program, post-secondary programs that are recognized in Canada as a college or university program. Language is very important. If you, normally we're looking, because it jumps a level, we're looking at scores of in IELTS 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, 8 in listening, or CELPIP, you're looking at 9s. Relevant Canadian work experience. This is the kind of work experience that I'm speaking about. It's the same as the Canadian Experience Class work experience, except Canadian Experience Class work permit work experience, we can only count within 1 year within the last 3 years. This work experience we can count within the last 10 years. Foreign work experience, if you have high-skilled foreign work experience, you can get points for that. That's high-skilled. Spouse, it just depends on your spouse. You either if they're super spouse, they can add some points if they're joined together with you on the application. If not, maybe your points maybe drop a little bit. Provincial nominee programs. So there are provincial nominee programs are programs where a province has made an agreement with the federal government so that the province can choose people that they want to get permanent residence. And there are certain express entry linked provincial nominee programs. Not all provincial nominee programs will give you 600 points. But if you participate in a provincial nominee program that's linked to express entry and you're nominated, you get 600 points for express entry. Previous study in Canada, you'll get some points if you completed a public study program in Canada. Arranged employment. Now, this is only for people who have work permits that are employer specific or have LMIAs. It's not for people who have open work permits, like postgrad work permits or spousal work permits. If you have siblings who are Canadians or permanent resident in Canada, you get a few points. Fluency of French. If you're fluent in French, you will have a lot of advantages to get permanent residence. And trade certification, which has to do with the construction trades. Okay. So let's say that you have enough points. You have your points for express entry. You kind of sit in the pool and you see whether or not you'll get an invitation to apply. Because the points right now are so high that we anticipate in the upcoming time, a lot of people are not going to be able to get an invitation to apply just like that. Here are some of the things that for express entry that you could, because we're in Ontario, let me talk about some Ontario provincial nominee programs that will give you 600 more points. So how the Ontario provincial nominee program works, it's the OINP, Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. The OINP works is that you would first need to be in the express entry pool in order to have a chance. You can't just apply directly to OINP, okay? So you're in the pool and they'll scan the people who are in the pool to see whether or not they want to issue you a notification of interest. There are three categories of this. The first one is the human capital stream. Sometimes right now they are inviting people under the tech streams, tech occupations. They are also inviting people under other occupations as well. They have before invited people at job offers. So this is something that is, something basically whatever they want to do. But in order to qualify for this, you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher. French speakers, if you have a bachelor's degree and you're fluent, you pass your French exam, you could also be invited. And just keep in mind that not only do you have to pass the minimum standard, they also do look at your express entry points because they also have a cutoff for express entry points that they want to have as well normally. Finally, this is for people in the skilled trades. So mostly construction trades. If you've been working in Ontario for 1 year, you could also be invited to apply. Okay, now that's enough about express entry. Let's talk about some other programs. These programs that I'm going to now talk about for OINP is not related to express entry at all, okay? And right now for these programs, currently the government has something that's similar to express entry in that you can't just apply directly. You have to be in the pool first, and then they can decide whether or not your points are high enough, okay? But it's very different criteria that they allocate to different categories. For example, then they express of entry. For example, age does not come into it. Some categories, language ability is not a thing. Other categories, language ability will give you some points. Some categories you may or may not need a job offer. Other categories you do, okay? The points are likely going to, yeah, so it's a little bit different for those. The draws are happening a few times a year. We don't know when they're going to happen, but a few times a year for these. Okay, so let me talk first about some of these streams that they have. The OINP Masters and PhD streams are for people who have graduated from a Masters and PhD program in Ontario. And you don't need a job offer at all, but you have to be ready to enter the labor market. You can't be studying anymore, okay? And you're going to be selected through the EOI system. The second category is the employer-based categories. And what it requires is for you to have a job offer from a qualified employer. If the employer is inside the GTA, they have to have a gross income of at least $1 million, have 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. Outside of the GTA, the gross income has to be $500,000, has 3 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. The job offer has to be full-time and permanent. If you are an international student that you've graduated from a 2-year program, if it's a 1-year program, it has to only allow people who already have a degree as a prerequisite to enter. Okay, then if you have the job offer, it's high skilled, but it only needs to meet entry level wage. Okay, skilled workers, this is for people who are not international. You haven't graduated from the program, but you have 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the occupation that is being that you have the job offer, okay, and the wage meets median wage, then you can also apply. And then this is one of the only low-skilled categories, and it's a specified list. A lot of farm workers, people in manufacturing, etc. If you and some in healthcare as well. If you have 9 months of work experience in Ontario in that occupation, and then you have the permanent job offer and full-time job offer, then we can also apply. Just quickly going through some other categories, spousal sponsorships. We talked about who a spouse is, someone who you're married to, or if you're common law with someone who you have lived together for at least 1 year in a conjugal relationship. You can do spousal sponsorships. There's a self-employed class for artists and athletes. If you've been self-employed for 2 out of 5 years, then you can qualify for that. Startup visa class. This is for people who want to start an innovative business in Canada, and you can get support from an incubator or angel investor group. Then we can apply for permanent residence under that class. Hong Kong PR Stream A and Stream B. These are people who are in the Hong Kong residence, and if you have worked in Canada for a year, or if you've studied in Canada, then you can apply as well. So I mean, these are some of the other categories. There are other sort of situations as well that we can look at, but essentially for economic streams, this is about it. So I've talked a lot about, different programs, and it must be really kind of overwhelming for a lot of you. Here's what I would suggest that you do next. First of all, you have to have a plan. Immigration, the laws do change a lot, but no matter what, you have to know what you're getting yourself into. You can't just think, oh, my friend did this, I'll do the same thing, or maybe I'll be able to do that. No, it requires a lot of planning in order to get to your immigration goals, okay? Once you have a plan, then you have to have the determination to get there. You may have to, study for your IELTS. Actually, I tell everybody, even if like English is your first and only language, I have a lot of people whose English is their first and only language who don't do well on IELTS or CELPIP, because these exams test your ability to do the exams. Okay, and so make sure you do those practice exams. Your study programs, maybe your 1-year program is not enough. Maybe you need to do another program. I know that's the last thing most people want to hear, but you have to think about what your priorities are. Make sure, your work permit, you have enough time on your work permit to get your Canadian work experience, if that's what you need to do. Third thing, make sure that you're staying in status and do not misrepresent. If you are here on a work permit, if you're here on a study permit, you're already in a very good position. But it's very easy to just, veer off the path a little bit. And if you do, the consequences are very, very harsh. Do not just listen to someone who tries to give you the easy way. Oh, don't worry about it. We can just pretend you did this, or you can just say this and you'll get permanent. No one will find out, okay? In Canada, if you misrepresent it, and even if later on you become a Canadian citizen, if they find out later on, years later on, 10 years, 15 years later on, they will take away your status, okay? Make sure that you do things right, and you don't have to worry about any of this, okay? Finally, hopefully you'll contact a lawyer in the very beginning so you can, have everything done properly. But if you've done something and you have something rejected, contact a lawyer right away. Do not sit on it, okay? There are very, very strict timelines in order to go to the federal court. 15 days if your application is decided into Canada, 60 days outside of Canada from the date of rejection. If you wait longer, then you may forego your ability to go to federal court. And the second thing is, oftentimes people think, oh, the IRCC, their call center, the people there are really nice. I'll just call them and they'll tell me what to do. They're immigration, right? They're immigration officers, right? No, they're not immigration officers. They are call center agents. And whatever they tell you, oftentimes are wrong. You can call 2-3 times, you'll probably get 2-3 different kinds of answers. Whatever they tell you, you cannot rely on them. If you rely on them to your detriment, they say, well, that's your problem. It's not their problem, okay? One of the things that oftentimes the agents will tell you to do, if you have something and you think, oh, this is not fair, they will tell you to go and write a letter to immigration. If you go and write a letter to immigration, you don't know what to say, and they reject your explanation, then that is counted as your one shot to apply for reconsideration. If at that time then you decide to come to me and say, oh, Elizabeth, look what happened, they rejected, I can't then go and submit another reconsideration. IRCC will say, this person already had their one shot to get a reconsideration. You can't, they're not even going to look at what I submit, okay? Finally, timelines are very important. If you have a rejection, your status may be already over, or may be in jeopardy of being over, or you may be soon out of time to apply for your postgrad work permit, etc. So whatever it is, contact a lawyer right away, okay? Anyway, so this is my contact information. If you wanted to contact us, I have the newsletter sign up as well. So yeah, so let me know. And if you have attended the webinar, let me know and we'll give you a discount on the consultation, initial consultation as well.